Humanity has achieved incredible things, but we also invented a platform where adults willingly pay thousands of dollars for literal garbage. We aren't talking about rare antiques. We are talking about used pregnancy tests, invisible art, and partially chewed breakfast food. If you ever needed proof that having money doesn't mean having a brain, here are 50 absurd purchases. 1. Most guys handle a miserable divorce by buying a tragically flashy sports car or taking up a weird hobby. Ian Usher decided to just liquidate his entire existence. He bundled his actual life into a single online auction, and for over $300,000, a total stranger inherited the whole package. The winning bidder got Ian's house, his vehicle, a trial at his actual job, and formal introductions to his bewildered friend group. Imagine paying $250,000 just to instantly step into a stranger's used life, complete with all their awkward social obligations. 2. You would expect the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to strictly purchase legendary guitars or iconic stage outfits. Instead, they logged onto the internet and bought a gigantic, flying hot dog. They paid real money for the massive fiberglass wiener that the band Phish notoriously rode over a concert crowd on New Year's Eve in 1994. An enormous hollow prop of processed meat is now legally classified and preserved as a priceless artifact of American music history. Somewhere, a highly educated museum curator has to meticulously dust a giant plastic bun every single morning. 3. Spending your hard-earned cash on celebrity memorabilia is one thing, but paying $5,000 for a piece of biological hotel trash crosses into severe psychiatric territory. Someone actually shelled out the price of a luxury European vacation for a used pregnancy test allegedly dug out of Britney Spears' bathroom garbage. Let the sheer insanity of that marinate for a second. An anonymous fan drained their savings account just to proudly own a little plastic stick that a pop star might have casually urinated on. You really have to wonder how they display that to houseguests. 4. Long before online crowdfunding was an acceptable way to beg for money, one absolute genius managed to sell a completely shattered laser pointer for over $400. His secret? He wrote a ridiculously long, hilarious essay detailing every single pathetic attempt he made to completely destroy the useless piece of junk. Bidders were not throwing their cash at broken electronics. They were essentially tipping a guy for making them laugh out loud at their desks. It just proves that if you spin a good enough yarn, you can literally sell literal garbage to total strangers. 5. If you ever feel guilty about a stupid late-night purchase, just remember that someone once paid over $10,000 for absolutely nothing. A highly opportunistic artist listed an invisible work of art, which was quite literally just an empty patch of wall space in a local gallery. The listing confidently promised a unique, conceptual experience, which is high society code for a total scam. The absolute best part? The buyer actually left a glowing review, claiming the air in the room felt much more artistic. That is a level of unchecked delusion most of us cannot afford. 6. Unlocking the deepest mysteries of the space-time continuum apparently does not require billions of dollars in highly classified government funding. You can just grab the secrets online for $25. A user auctioned off what he frantically swore were the original, fully functional blueprints for a working time machine. He provided zero actual proof, just a pile of cryptic, hand-drawn diagrams and the vague promise of temporal adventure. Honestly, for $25, it is way cheaper than taking your family to the movies. The buyer is probably in his garage right now, aggressively taping copper wires to a toaster. 7. Turning ordinary water into fine wine is a classic religious miracle, but turning dirty street water into hard cash is just pure American capitalism. An enterprising individual scooped up a bottle of murky runoff from a puddle outside the Vatican right after a heavy rainstorm. He boldly claimed the puddle had been instantly blessed because the tires of the Pope's car had driven directly through it. Some deeply faithful person happily paid over $190 for this holy pothole juice. That is definitely one highly creative way to monetize municipal infrastructure failures. 8. The literary world is absolutely packed with eccentric collectors, but dropping an entire $1 million on a famous author's used commode is a whole new level of crazy. The actual porcelain throne belonging to the notoriously reclusive author J.D. Salinger hit the auction block with a deeply disturbing selling point. The seller proudly advertised that the toilet was completely uncleaned and could still contain the author's DNA. So, some anonymous millionaire bought a dirty bathroom fixture, presumably hoping that sitting on it might magically cure their writer's block. A fool and his money are truly easily parted. 9. Internet bidding wars can get incredibly intense, especially when people foolishly think they are buying undeniable proof of the paranormal. A guy found a horrific, hairless, rotting creature washed up on a beach and immediately listed it as a genuine dead sea monster. The collective delusion was so strong that bids absolutely skyrocketed to over $150,000 before the platform finally panicked and pulled the plug. Marine biologists later took one look at the photos and quickly identified the legendary Leviathan as a soggy, decaying raccoon. Someone almost bought a six-figure trash panda. 10. If you are going to intentionally invite demonic forces into your living room, you might as well make it highly entertaining. A self-proclaimed paranormal investigator listed a used rubber chicken, solemnly warning potential buyers that the toy was violently haunted. He claimed it would randomly squawk in the dead of night, possessed by an annoying, chaotic spirit named Alphonse. The fact that this ridiculous cursed object sold for $125 is completely staggering. Imagine trying to patiently explain to your spouse that you spent the grocery budget on a squawking ghost toy. 11. In the year 2021, modern society officially lost its collective mind over the shape of fast food. Someone found a McDonald's Chicken McNugget that vaguely resembled a tiny little astronaut from the incredibly popular video game Among Us. Instead of simply eating it with some barbecue sauce, they put it up for auction, where it somehow sold for roughly $100,000. Someone out there authorized a bank transfer equal to the price of a high-end luxury sports car, all to own a piece of processed poultry that will eventually turn into a petrified rock. 12. Decorating your hallway is usually about finding nice, calming colors, not inviting a supernatural arsonist into your home. A famous mass-produced painting known as The Crying Boy was regularly auctioned off with a terrifying urban legend attached to it. The myth explicitly stated that houses containing the painting would mysteriously burn to the ground, leaving only the portrait completely untouched among the smoking ashes. Naturally, instead of running away screaming, people threw their wallets at the screen. Buyers were intentionally paying a premium to hang a supposedly cursed fire-starting ghost child right next to their smoke detectors. 13. Finding decent real estate in today's market is tough. But what if your ideal dream home needs to comfortably survive a direct thermonuclear strike? An entire decommissioned United States missile silo complex in upstate New York was casually tossed onto the auction block and sold for $2.1 million. The lucky winner got 52 acres of surface land and a massive, heavily fortified underground bunker. Forget about a standard two-car garage or a modern open-concept kitchen. This is the ultimate playground for the paranoid billionaire who desperately wants to ride out the apocalypse in style. 14. Charity auctions are normally a fantastic way to raise money by selling signed guitars or fancy dinner dates, but this specific one crossed straight into biological warfare. After actress Scarlett Johansson blew her nose into a tissue during an appearance on The Tonight Show, that crumpled, mucus-filled piece of paper was immediately bagged and auctioned off. It brought in an astonishing $5,300. Yes, the money went to a genuinely good cause, but at the end of the day, a fully grown adult willingly paid $5,000 to professionally frame a celebrity's preserved cold germs. 15. Forget investing in stocks or real estate. The real money is apparently in highly specific breakfast cereal. Two sisters from Virginia found a completely ordinary cornflake that vaguely resembled the geographical shape of Illinois. Instead of just eating it, they threw it on the internet, where a trivia website bought it for $1,350. Someone literally handed over a monthly mortgage payment for a single stale piece of processed grain simply because it looked like a Midwestern state. 16. Dropping over $1 million on a used laptop is crazy, but buying one specifically because it is a severe digital biohazard is just insane. Intentionally loaded with 6 of the most globally destructive computer viruses in human history, this machine was marketed as a highly provocative piece of modern art. Bidders fiercely fought over this digital Pandora's box until it sold for an unbelievable $1.3 million. The buyer essentially spent a massive fortune on a bricked keyboard that cannot even be connected to the internet without risking a total global financial meltdown. 17. Grocery store runs are usually pretty mundane, but if you want your standard condiments to have a severe existential crisis, it will definitely cost you extra. A completely standard jar of pickles hit the auction block with a $50 price tag because the seller loudly claimed the vegetables were sentient. According to the bizarre listing, the pickles would constantly whisper bleak philosophy late at night, and the owner was completely sick of their sour outlook on life. The buyer paid a massive markup for 50 cents worth of generic cucumbers, banking entirely on a funny story. 18. You can apparently sell literally anything if you attach the right celebrity name to it, including the basic mixture of nitrogen and oxygen we all breathe for free. A standard mason jar, supposedly containing air captured directly from a red carpet event attended by Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, was fiercely bidded up to $530. There was absolutely zero certificate of authenticity, mostly because you cannot authenticate an invisible gas. Someone dropped half a grand to own a sealed container of Los Angeles smog simply because a famous actor might have briefly exhaled near it. 19. The public's bizarre obsession with deceased Hollywood icons often borders on the macabre, but buying their internal medical records is just wildly inappropriate. The actual hospital chest X-rays of Marilyn Monroe, taken way back in 1954, were tossed onto the auction block and sold for $45,000. Someone shelled out the equivalent of a teacher's annual salary just to own a high-contrast image of a legendary actress's ribcage and lungs. It is a level of fanaticism that proves that once you become incredibly famous, not even your internal organs get a basic right to privacy. 20. Parenting is deeply exhausting on the best of days, so why not blame your kid's terrible behavior on a demonic bath toy and make a quick buck? A desperately stressed father sold a supposedly possessed rubber duck for over $100. His pitch was that this sinister yellow piece of plastic was actively making his young son physically stronger and far more aggressive every single time he played with it. Honestly, auctioning off the exact source of your child's discipline problems to the highest bidder is a genius move. The new owner basically paid to be terrorized. 21. Most folks browse the internet looking for vintage watches or cheap car parts, but occasionally, a whole working municipality pops up in the search results. The entire town of Bridgeville, California, including 8 houses, a functioning post office, and a highly populated cemetery, was auctioned off for nearly $1.8 million. Surprisingly, the winning bidder got severe cold feet and backed out of the massive deal shortly after. You have to imagine that buyer's remorse hits a whole lot differently when you are trying to return an entire zip code full of dead bodies to the seller. 22. Medical waste is usually strictly incinerated for public safety, but when it passes through the urinary tract of Captain Kirk, it suddenly becomes a high-end collector's item. Actor William Shatner remarkably sold his own surgically removed kidney stone to an online casino for $25,000. To be completely fair, all the cash went straight to a housing charity, making this painful calcium deposit the most philanthropic bodily discharge in human history. Shatner boldly went where no gallstone had ever gone before, and someone eagerly paid the price of a mid-sized sedan to display his calcified agony. 23. Corporate sponsorships have officially gone way too far when they start permanently replacing your actual family heritage. A guy looking for some very quick cash successfully sold the legal rights to his own last name to a telecommunications company. He actually drove down to the courthouse, filed the paperwork, and walked away with nearly $50,000 for officially becoming JasonHeadsets.com. For 50 grand, this man willingly turned himself into a walking, breathing internet URL for the rest of his natural life. You really have to pity his future children when they have to spell that tragedy. 24. Interior design is a highly subjective art form, but dropping $2 grand to make your living room look exactly like a 1989 cartoon is a very bold choice. A fanatic commissioned and then sold an exact custom-made replica of the iconic lumpy brown couch from The Simpsons. To really seal the deal, the ambitious seller even threw in a completely non-functional, chunky prop television set for the buyer to blindly stare at. Somebody out there paid a massive premium just so they could sit in their house and pretend to be Homer Simpson every single weekend. 25. Buying stage memorabilia from the king of rock and roll is standard practice, but purchasing his actual saliva is where we deeply need to draw a hard line. A paper cup containing just a few drops of water, supposedly left behind by Elvis Presley at a concert in 1977, was aggressively auctioned off for $455. We are not talking about a signed guitar pick here. Someone literally opened their wallet to purchase decades-old, evaporated backwash from a dead musician. Extreme fanaticism is a disease, and apparently, it heavily circulates in a tiny Dixie cup. 26. After surviving a horrific plane crash that ultimately required his leg to be amputated, a man in North Carolina did the only logical thing. He had the severed limb professionally preserved and then tossed it onto the internet to see exactly what it would fetch. The winning bidder did not want to respectfully bury it or study it for science. Instead, they proudly turned it into a functioning floor lamp, heavily inspired by the classic movie A Christmas Story. There is absolutely nothing that says home sweet home quite like illuminating your living room with a stranger's skeleton. 27. Making new friends as a grown adult is incredibly difficult, which is probably exactly why 4 guys in Australia decided to just auction off their companionship. They listed a guaranteed weekend of heavy drinking, wild shenanigans, and good times with their rowdy crew. The winning bid skyrocketed to over 1,300 Australian dollars. The buyer basically rented a pack of aggressive, beer-fueled best buddies for a 48-hour bender. It is honestly a fantastic business model, assuming you somehow survive the alcohol poisoning and do not wake up completely stranded in the middle of the outback. 28. Sometimes, a simple vehicle becomes globally famous for all the wrong reasons. The actual abandoned bus from the famous book and movie Into the Wild, where Christopher McCandless tragically lived and died, was finally airlifted out of the Alaskan wilderness and sold to a local museum. For years, delusional hikers kept nearly killing themselves trying to aggressively trek out to find it. Now, instead of risking extreme hypothermia and starvation just to take a cool selfie, tourists can simply pay a $10 museum admission fee to safely stare at a legally acquired rusted metal death trap. 29. Fighting the dark forces of the underworld used to require years of intense seminary school, but now you can apparently outsource it to online craft projects. One highly entrepreneurial user assembled and sold a deluxe exorcism kit for $99. The heavy-duty spiritual arsenal consisted of a cheap wooden crucifix, a small vial of holy water that was almost certainly filled from a kitchen sink, and a step-by-step demon banishing guide printed straight off a random website. Somebody willingly paid almost $100 for a cardboard box of cheap supplies you could easily steal from a dollar store. 30. Traditional therapy is incredibly expensive, so a man from Florida found a much cheaper way to legally deal with his psychological issues. He aggressively captured his 3 quote-unquote inner demons, trapped them tightly inside small glass vials, and put them up for sale online. He even wrote extensive backstories for each one, blaming them for all his terrible life choices and bad habits. Astonishingly, all 3 vials actually sold to paying customers. Some weirdly generous strangers literally spent their own cash to physically import another man's heavily weaponized emotional baggage right into their own living rooms. 31. Real estate flipping is a pretty common American side hustle, but attempting to completely flip an entire sovereign nation is a level of audacity that deserves a slow clap. A massive prankster from Australia officially listed the entire country of New Zealand for sale, starting the bold bidding at a single cent. Astoundingly, the auction actually gained huge traction, with patriotic bidders driving the price up to $3,000 before corporate lawyers frantically stepped in and nuked the listing. Imagine having the absolute nerve to try and quietly sell off 5 million people just to make a quick buck. 32. Used car salesmen usually try to creatively hide a vehicle's massive flaws. But Hollywood actor Guy Pearce took the exact opposite approach. When he listed his 1997 Holden Commodore, his description was brutally, uncomfortably honest, heavily emphasizing that the car was absolutely covered in dents and possessed several strange, highly unidentifiable smells. Despite the promise of a lingering gross odor, the winning bid smashed past $13,000. It really goes to show that if you are famous enough, people will gleefully empty their bank accounts just to drive around in your heavily depreciated rolling trash can. 33. If you are actively being terrorized by a restless spirit, do not bother calling a priest. Just grab some Tupperware from the kitchen. A guy in Arkansas claimed a malevolent ghost was completely ruining his life, so he did the logical, highly scientific thing of trapping the entity inside a glass jar and throwing it onto the internet. He explicitly warned the buyer that opening the lid would immediately release pure evil. The winning bid was a measly $50. Honestly, $50 seems like an absolute steal for eternal damnation, but also a terrible return on investment. 34. Littering is usually considered a minor crime, but occasionally it miraculously becomes a profitable piece of contemporary literature. A seller found a discarded, deeply crumpled shopping list in a grocery store parking lot and boldly decided to auction it off as a profound glimpse into a stranger's soul. The hastily scribbled list included mundane items like milk and eggs, followed abruptly by the word sadness. Someone actually paid $10 for this tiny scrap of paper. We live in a society where people will gladly pay hard cash to beautifully frame somebody else's documented dairy-based misery. 35. Massive tech monopolies are a huge modern problem, but one dedicated internet troll bravely tried to solve it by simply buying the whole thing outright. A prankster confidently listed the entire internet for sale, absolutely guaranteeing the winning bidder total godlike control over all online activities. Fueled by hundreds of other intensely bored users, the massive bidding war quickly shot up to a staggering $1 million. Customer support eventually had to step in, violently kill the auction, and gently remind everyone that you cannot, under any legal framework, purchase the entire World Wide Web with a debit card. 36. Weird hobbies are supposed to be deeply relaxing, but one Australian librarian took his free time into severely disturbing territory. For years, he meticulously harvested his own belly button lint, carefully cataloging the fuzz and sorting it by color and the exact year of extraction. Instead of seeking immediate psychiatric help, he bundled the entire grotesque collection and sold it for an undisclosed lump sum to an actual operating museum. Somewhere right now, innocent families on vacation are staring at a brightly lit glass display case filled to the brims with decades of a stranger's dried abdominal sweat. 37. The truth is supposedly out there, but you are absolutely not going to find it with hardware store garbage. A highly confident seller listed a genuine UFO metal detector that looked suspiciously like a cheap $10 stud finder, heavily modified with crumpled aluminum foil and a violently bent wire coat hanger. The product description was so aggressively authoritative and steeped in fake science that the contraption actually sold for $66. The lucky buyer is probably standing in his backyard right now, waving a piece of drywall equipment at the night sky, patiently waiting for the mothership. 38. Memorabilia collectors will enthusiastically pay top dollar for authenticity, which is exactly why the original Spider-Man suit worn by Tobey Maguire sparked a massive bidding war, ending at over $55,000. It was a wildly historic sale, right up until the platform realized the winning bidder was just a teenager who had secretly hijacked his father's credit card. You can only imagine the sheer unadulterated terror in that household when the dad casually checked his monthly bank statement. The sale was instantly canceled, permanently proving that with great credit card debt comes heavily enforced parental grounding. 39. True companionship is totally priceless, unless you are actively buying someone else's hallucination, in which case it costs about $3,000. One visionary user randomly decided he had outgrown his imaginary friend, a deeply loyal entity named John Malipuman, and ruthlessly auctioned him off to the highest bidder. The seller confidently promised the invisible guy was in great health and was a fantastic listener. Someone seriously paid nearly $3,000 for a literal figment of another man's imagination. You really have to wonder how that shipping transaction worked. Did the mailman just hand over an empty cardboard box? 40. Modern dating apps are absolute garbage, so a group of guys in England heroically took matters into their own hands by putting their perpetually single, incredibly sad friend up for auction. They literally listed him as a guaranteed date for whoever placed the highest bid. He ended up miraculously selling for a pathetic £7 to a woman who actually followed through and met him for drinks. There is no public record of whether they ever got married, but being legally bought online for the price of a cheap ham sandwich is a spectacularly humiliating story. 41. Raising a child is incredibly expensive, so one highly pregnant woman in Indiana brilliantly decided to monetize her long gestation period. She successfully auctioned off prime advertising real estate directly on her massive baby bump for a solid $500. A local company eagerly paid the fee to have their corporate logo thickly painted right onto her stomach for an entire month. She effectively turned her third trimester into a walking, waddling billboard. You heavily have to wonder if the kid was eventually born with a mysterious, deeply ingrained psychological urge to blindly purchase that specific brand. 42. When times get ridiculously tough financially, most people will maybe sell their old DVDs or a guitar. A man from Florida boldly decided to skip the garage sale entirely and just auction off his own liver. In an absolutely insane twist, the bidding for his vital organ actually skyrocketed to a mind-bending $5.7 million before the website panicked and permanently deleted the listing. Casually selling your own internal organs to anonymous strangers on the internet is highly illegal. It was a brilliant strategy to pay off his mortgage, but definitely not one his doctor endorsed. 43. Craft beer enthusiasts will enthusiastically pay stupid amounts of money for a rare vintage, but buying a bottle with a massive historical body count is a bit extreme. A single, fully intact bottle of Lowenbräu beer, allegedly recovered directly from the smoldering wreckage of the 1937 Hindenburg airship disaster, was fiercely auctioned off for over $16,000. The buyer voluntarily handed over a small fortune to own a beverage that was violently shaken, boiled in a massive inferno, and permanently associated with one of history's most famous fiery explosions. Hopefully, they kept the bottle cap firmly sealed. 44. Sports memorabilia is usually all about brightly celebrating legendary victories, but sometimes people just want to proudly own a monument to catastrophic failure. The exact baseball that infamously rolled right through the legs of Bill Buckner during the 1986 World Series was auctioned off for over $400,000. The deeply crazy part? The winning bidder was Hollywood actor Charlie Sheen. He willingly shelled out nearly $500,000 to possess a filthy sphere of cork and leather that viciously ruined an entire city's dreams. It is the absolute ultimate flex in celebrating a nightmare. 45. Celebrity worship officially hit rock bottom when a 19-year-old fan purchased Justin Timberlake's half-eaten French toast for over $3,000. The pop star had left the partially chewed breakfast on a plate after a morning radio interview. A deeply unwell superfan aggressively outbid everyone just to own a few bites of syrup-soaked bread that had briefly touched a singer's saliva. She actually told reporters she planned to freeze dry the leftover meal and proudly display it on her bedroom dresser. 46. A woman in Florida made a grilled cheese sandwich, took one bite, and boldly decided the burn marks perfectly resembled the Virgin Mary. Instead of calling a psychiatrist, she kept it safely in a plastic box for an entire decade before auctioning it off. A casino happily paid $28,000 for this sacred, 10-year-old piece of rotting dairy and bread. It is truly comforting to know that divine intervention now occasionally manifests as a heavily expired, mass-produced lunch item. 47. Art collectors usually want a piece that really speaks to them, but probably not one that actively crawls out of the heavy frame while they sleep. A famously cursed painting known as The Hands Resist Him sparked a massive bidding war and incredibly sold for over $1,000. The sellers clearly stated in the wild description that the creepy children depicted in the artwork would physically move around during the night. So the buyer did not just purchase a weird indie painting. They actively paid a premium to boldly import a high-risk supernatural home invasion into their bedroom. 48. People will eagerly buy absolute garbage if it has a highly glamorous zip code deeply attached to it. The original 1923 Hollywoodland sign, which had been miserably rotting away in storage after being replaced in the 70s, was unceremoniously dumped onto an online auction. A wildly optimistic nightclub promoter bought the entire 45-foot-tall, rusted-out landmark for $450,000. He essentially liquidated a massive trust fund just to legally own the world's largest, sharpest, and most famous pile of tetanus-infested scrap metal. Figuring out the cross-country shipping logistics on that nightmare must have been hilarious. 49. If you thought having a slightly weird first name builds strong character, imagine being a walking promotional stunt for a heavily unregulated gambling website. A wildly irresponsible woman from Arkansas successfully sold the official naming rights to her unborn child for $15,000. The winning bidder was an online casino, meaning her flesh-and-blood son was legally baptized as GoldenPalace.com Silverman. For the absolute price of a used Honda Civic, she completely destroyed her child's future dating prospects. Just imagine the sheer psychological damage that poor kid suffered every single time a substitute teacher read the morning attendance. 50. After centuries of intense philosophical debate by the greatest minds in history, someone finally decided to just sell the exact meaning of life on the internet. A highly confident user listed a mysterious auction promising to instantly reveal the ultimate reason for human existence to the highest bidder. The profound, universe-altering secret ultimately sold to a brave soul for a grand total of $3.26. For the price of a cheap gas station coffee, someone reportedly received a very brief, incredibly disappointing email. I want to know who is funding this madness. Seriously, go to the comments and tell me the most ridiculously stupid thing you've ever wasted your hard-earned cash on. If you say you've never bought useless internet garbage, you are absolutely lying to yourself. Drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and make sure your credit card is hidden before you make a terrible mistake.